My daughters said I wasn't their real dad, so I stopped acting like one. But they weren't ready for that. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video so you don't miss any interesting stories. So how did it all start? My daughters told me I wasn't their real father, so I figured there was no point in acting like one. What they didn't expect were the consequences. It all began on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I had just wrapped up a long day at work and was looking forward to unwinding for the evening. But the second I stepped inside the house, I knew something was off. It was too quiet, eerily so. My wife sat at the kitchen table, eyes locked on her phone, scrolling aimlessly. The girls were nowhere in sight. I set my briefcase down, and that's when my wife finally glanced up. There was something in her expression, something tight and unreadable. Trying to sound casual, I asked, "Where are the girls?" She hesitated, didn't answer right away. Instead, she dropped her gaze back to her phone, her finger still moving over the screen like she wasn't really seeing it. And then I heard it. Faint voices, muffled, coming from the back of the house. That was strange. The back door was supposed to be locked. At first, I didn't think much of it, just walked toward the sound like I always would. But as I stepped into the hallway, I caught a glimpse of my daughters through the open living room door. They were sitting close together on the couch, their heads bowed, speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't catch everything, but the few words I did hear made my stomach twist. "We don't even have to call him Dad anymore," one of them said. "He's not our real father." "I can't believe Mom married him," the other muttered. The words hit like a punch to the gut. My breath stalled, my feet rooted to the floor. How could they say that? I had raised them since they were born, been there for every scraped knee, every school play, every late-night homework session. I was their father, whether they wanted to acknowledge it or not. I should have stepped in right then and there, confronted them. But something held me back. A flood of confusion and hurt rushed over me, and I needed a second to catch my bearings. Instead of walking in, I stepped back, quiet as a ghost, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The rest of the evening felt like a blur. The girls barely spoke to me, barely even looked at me. They were distant, colder than I'd ever felt them be. My wife didn't say a word about it either. She just sat there, drinking her wine, eyes never meeting mine. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, I stayed up, staring at the ceiling. "Not our real father." The words repeated over and over in my head. How could they think that? What had I missed? I sifted through every memory, every moment I'd spent with them, trying to find some clue, some explanation. I had always done my best, always been present, always tried to be the father they needed after their biological dad walked out on them. The next morning, I got up early. My wife was still asleep, but the girls were already awake, hunched over their phones at the kitchen table. The tension in the room was thick, impossible to ignore. Things weren't the same. Not even close. And I knew, I needed answers. More than that, I needed to understand why they felt this way. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I looked them straight in the eye and asked, "Do you two really believe I'm not your father?" They didn't even glance up from their phones. One of them muttered, almost offhandedly, "You're not. You never really were." The words hit like a fist to the gut. It felt like time had slowed down, every syllable stretching out, hammering against my chest. My heart pounded, the sound almost deafening in my ears. But what shook me even more was how little they seemed to care. They weren't upset. They weren't lashing out. There were no tears, no anger, just a simple, emotionless dismissal of everything I'd ever done for them. I stood there, stunned, trying to wrap my head around it. Finally, I swallowed hard and said, my voice tight, "Well, if that's how you feel, then I guess I won't act like a dad anymore." Nothing. No reaction. Their eyes stayed glued to their screens like I hadn't just dropped a bomb in the middle of the room. I wasn't even sure if I meant it or if I was just reacting on instinct. But the words were out there now, hanging in the air like an unspoken challenge. Without waiting for a response, I turned on my heel and walked away. For the next few days, I kept my word. I stopped doing all the little things I'd always done for them. No making breakfast. No reminders about homework or chores. No checking in on how their day had gone. I just stopped. At first, I wasn't sure if they even noticed. They had grown so used to me handling everything that it probably didn't register right away. But soon, the shift became impossible to ignore. On the fourth morning, one of them finally showed the first crack. I was at the table, sipping my coffee, reading the paper, when she shuffled in, still groggy. She paused, blinking at me like something was off. "Aren't you gonna make breakfast?" she asked hesitantly. I barely looked up. Just shrugged. "I don't know. You don't really need me to, do you?" She just stood there, confused more than anything. She didn't argue. Didn't get mad. The next day, she didn't ask again. By the end of the week, the whole atmosphere in the house had shifted. The tension was no longer just between me and the girls, my wife felt it too. She had noticed. She saw that I wasn't stepping in to smooth things over anymore. That I wasn't automatically fixing things when they went wrong. One evening, she finally confronted me. "Why are you acting like this? Why aren't you taking care of them?" I kept my eyes on the TV, barely reacting. "I'm not their father anymore. They don't want me to be. So why should I pretend?" Silence. She had no response for that. She hadn't expected it. Hadn't seen this coming. But this time, I wasn't going to apologize. As the days passed, I started to notice something different. The girls weren't as sure of themselves anymore. The way they looked at me had changed, there was an unease in their expressions, a confusion they couldn't quite put into words. They didn't understand what had happened. Didn't grasp why the version of me they'd always relied on was suddenly gone. And that's when things really started to change. At first, it was just small things, a few quiet glances exchanged between my wife and the girls, but nothing more. They still walked past me in the hallway like I was just another piece of furniture, something to be ignored. The house felt different now. It was empty in a way it had never been before, stripped of warmth, stripped of laughter. A hollow shell compared to what it used to be. But I had my reasons for keeping my distance. They had made it clear where I stood when they told me I wasn't their real father. I wasn't about to cross a line they had drawn themselves. Then, one evening, the tension finally snapped. The girls had been especially withdrawn that day. They sat through dinner in silence, barely looking up, their eyes fixed on their plates like they held the most fascinating thing in the world. The unspoken words between us were suffocating, thick in the air like an argument waiting to happen. After dinner, one of them finally broke. "Why aren't you helping anymore?" Her voice was small, uncertain, but there was an edge to it that I couldn't ignore. I didn't bother looking up from my book. "You didn't want me to help." She frowned, her brows knitting together. "That's not what we meant." I met her gaze then, my voice colder than I expected. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you told me I wasn't your father." The words landed hard. I could see it in her face, the way confusion flickered across her expression, like she couldn't quite grasp how things had spiraled this far. "But we didn't mean it like that," she said, her voice quieter now. "Oh, really?" I cut in. "You were just mad. Just throwing words around without thinking. You never stopped to consider what it would feel like, to be dismissed like that, to be treated like some stranger." Silence. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No argument. No excuses. Just the slow, dawning realization of what she had said. I wasn't some stranger. I had been there for them. Every single time. And now, they were finally beginning to understand that. My wife, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "You don't have to be like this." I didn't answer right away. Because honestly, I didn't know what to say. I had given this family everything, my time, my energy, my love. I had poured every ounce of myself into being their father. And yet, with just a few careless words, they had tossed it all aside. Maybe I don't have to be like this, I said finally, my voice steady. But I'm not going to pretend like nothing happened either. You all made it clear where I stand in this house. I'm just the guy who brings in the paycheck and fixes things when they break, right? For a second, my wife's face softened. But I wasn't looking for sympathy. I didn't want an apology. I just wanted them to understand, really understand, what it felt like to be cast aside. The days that followed were a strange mix of tension and realization. The girls started noticing something different. Their mother wasn't stepping in anymore. She wasn't trying to smooth things over, wasn't acting as the buffer between us like she always had. And that seemed to hit them harder than I expected. They had grown comfortable in the routine we had built, the one where I was always the father, the provider, the fixer. But now that I wasn't playing that role, everything felt off. My absence left a gap, an imbalance, and they didn't know how to fill it. By the end of the week, I had let go of every single thing I used to do for them. And for the first time, they were starting to feel it. I didn't make their lunches. I didn't remind them to take their vitamins. I didn't fix their broken toys or help with schoolwork. I barely even acknowledged them when they spoke. If they didn't want me as their father, then fine, they could go find one somewhere else. One evening, as I sat in the living room, flipping through a book, the youngest hesitated in the doorway before slowly making her way over. She sat down beside me, fidgeting with her hands, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Dad, can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. Just kept my gaze on the page in front of me. "About what?" "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't mean what we said. I didn't mean it. We just... I don't know. I didn't think it would hurt you." The silence between us stretched, heavy and unspoken. I could feel the sincerity in her words, but the anger still sat deep in my chest, refusing to let go. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to just let it go. But how could I be sure she wasn't just saying this because things had gotten uncomfortable? I turned the page of my book, my voice quiet but firm. "You should have thought about that before." Her shoulders sagged. For a second, I thought she might cry, but she didn't. She just sat there, staring at the floor, her expression drawn tight with regret. Guilt was written all over her face, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then, a voice in the back of my mind reminded me, this was the consequence of their actions. This was what I had wanted them to feel. The next day, my wife confronted me, her frustration plain as day. "You've made your point. Why are you punishing them like this?" "I'm not punishing them," I said evenly, though inside, I was anything but calm. "I'm giving them the space to figure it out. They don't get to just dismiss me and then expect everything to go back to the way it was." She studied me for a long moment, searching my face for something. Finally, she let out a heavy sigh. "I think they realize what they've done. But you're making it worse. You're not being fair." I exhaled sharply and stood up, suddenly exhausted by the conversation. "Fair?" I repeated. "They're the ones who made this unfair in the first place." The days that followed were filled with uneasy silences, awkward interactions, and a growing awareness that something had shifted between us, something fragile and breaking. The girls barely spoke to me. They didn't ask for anything. They didn't even try to pretend like everything was fine. And for the first time, I could see just how deep the divide had become. I knew they regretted their words. That much was obvious. But was it too late for me to care? By the following weekend, the shift was undeniable. The daughters who had been avoiding me for days now stole hesitant glances in my direction, their expressions uncertain. They weren't just missing the things I used to do for them, they were feeling what I had felt all along. The sting of being ignored. The loneliness of being cast aside. It wasn't just about the words they had said anymore. It was the weight of their silence that was finally sinking in. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep this up. A part of me still hoped they'd truly understand what they had lost. But another part of me wondered if this was the right way to teach them that lesson. Maybe they weren't ready to see it. Or maybe they never would. That Saturday, my wife turned to me as she grabbed her purse. "Can you come with me to the parent-teacher conference?" she asked. It was for our youngest. I hesitated, not sure what to say. But I knew this was the moment something had to give. I hesitated. There was still too much left unsaid, too much tension hanging between us, thick and unmoving. I knew what my wife was hoping for, that if we went together, maybe things would start to smooth over. But I wasn't interested in pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. "I'll go," I said, my voice flat. When we arrived at the school, the place felt unfamiliar, like I didn't quite belong there. I hadn't been to one of these in years. My daughter sat in her seat, her shoulders hunched, her eyes flicking between her mother and me like she was bracing for something. The conference itself was routine, grades, behavior, the usual updates. But none of that was what had me on edge. It was her. The way she wouldn't look at me. The way she barely acknowledged I was even there. Like I had faded into the background of her life, a presence that no longer mattered. After the meeting, we stepped outside into the crisp autumn air. My wife turned to me, her expression drawn tight with frustration. "You need to talk to them," she said, her voice low but urgent. I let out a breath, staring off toward the parking lot. "I have talked." My voice was measured, but distant. "And they've made it pretty clear how they feel. They're not going to figure this out on their own," she pressed. "You're their father. You're supposed to lead the way." I stopped walking. Her words hit a nerve. "I'm supposed to lead the way?" I repeated, bitterness creeping into my tone. "Really? That's what you think?" I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. Because last I checked, they were the ones who decided I wasn't their father. They were the ones who said it. Not me. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, she had no answer. Just a long, searching look, as if she no longer knew what to say. The drive home was silent. Tense. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw my daughter standing by the front door, shifting awkwardly, as if she had been waiting. I didn't stop. Didn't acknowledge her. Just walked past without a word, stepping inside. But this time, something was different. They followed. Hovering at the threshold of the living room, lingering in the space between us. I didn't look up from where I sat, my eyes fixed on the television, though I wasn't really watching it. The distance between us had settled in so deep, it felt like a part of me now. "Dad," the youngest spoke, her voice small. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. Just let the silence stretch between us. I could feel her standing there, waiting, the air thick with regret. But I wasn't going to make this easy for her. "You want to talk now?" I said finally, my voice quiet, still not looking at her. "Funny. You didn't need to talk when you told me I wasn't your real dad." Her face fell, guilt settling deep in her features. But it didn't make me feel any better. I was tired of always being the one to fix things, tired of being the father when it felt like they only wanted one when it was convenient for them. "I didn't mean it," she said softly. "I was just angry. And confused. And, I don't know why I said that." The words were honest. I could hear it. But they didn't undo what had already been done. They didn't erase the hurt. "I know you didn't mean it," I said, finally looking at her. "But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt." "I've been trying to understand," I said, my voice quieter now. "Why you said it. Why you pushed me away like that after everything I've done for you." She didn't have an answer. Neither did her sister, who had been standing silently in the corner, watching this unfold with wide, uncertain eyes. After a long pause, the older one finally spoke. "I don't know what we were thinking, Dad." Her voice was soft, raw. "I'm sorry. I really am." I looked at both of them, their faces open, their eyes wide with apology. And yet, even as the words hung in the air, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was too late. Too much had shifted between us. The rift was deep, and an apology, no matter how sincere, couldn't erase what had already been done. "Sorry doesn't fix everything," I said, my tone even but firm. "You can't just tell me I'm not your father, then expect everything to go back to normal when it's convenient for you." They flinched. I could see the regret, feel the weight of it pressing down on them. But that didn't make it any easier. Regret didn't undo hurt. From the corner of my eye, I saw my wife step into the room. She didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway, taking it all in. She knew. She had seen the toll this had taken on all of us. But even she didn't have the answers. The girls stood there a moment longer, their shoulders slumped, their expressions heavy with shame and something else, something closer to sorrow. But it wasn't their words that shifted something in me. It was the realization on their faces. The understanding of what they had lost. Not just me. But the idea of family itself. And for the first time, I understood something too. I wasn't the only one who needed to figure things out. Maybe there was still a way back. But it would take more than just words. It would take time. Trust. And something we had all let slip through our fingers. Effort. I exhaled slowly. "I don't know where we go from here," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I need you to show me that you care. Not just say it." The youngest nodded, her face pale but her eyes holding something new, understanding. "We will," she said. Her voice was small but steady. And in that moment, something shifted. Because this wasn't just about them realizing the weight of their words. It was about me realizing how far I had let this silence stretch between us. Maybe we could still fix this. Maybe. But it was going to take all of us. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope.